there guys, welcome back to a brand new YouTube video where today we're going to be doing a lens review of the Sigma 20-40mm f2.8 lens. Since its release back in 2001, it's been made available for the Canon EF mount, the Nikon F mount and also the Pentax K mount. For this review I'm going to be splitting it into two different sections, one being discussing the pros of this lens and the other one discussing the cons and things I generally don't like, and at the end I'll be discussing whether I think that you should pick this lens up or if you can actually find it, since it's quite a rare lens since it's so old and it's also been discontinued. One of the first things that made me look at this lens whilst doing some research on it was the fact that it had a 20-40mm focal range, and this is really quite versatile. Obviously it's not a 20-40-70, but 20-40mm for the price I got it was actually a really good focal range to go for. 20mm being the fact that I can shoot architecture, landscapes and get some good wide angle shots when shooting events with it, and also being able to punch all the way into 40mm is really good because I can get some more intimate shots. It's not quite a 50, but being able to shoot at 35mm with autofocus now and obviously between 20 and 40 makes it a really great walk around lens to have on a full frame DSLR. Also the fact that it's f2.8 all the way through, it might not perform the best at f2.8, I'll get onto that later, but obviously having an aperture the entire way through does help me get a better exposure in low light situations and also gives me that nice background bokeh. Obviously you don't get that much background separation when you're shooting at 20mm just because you don't get that much compression with the wide angle, but it still gives me that ability to get a better exposure rather than having to shoot say at f4 and then bump up the ISO. Despite it being ever so slightly noisy, the autofocus motor in this lens is actually really fast. The newer Sigma lenses use the HSM motor, so that's sort of really quiet, but this lens is a little bit noisy, but it's actually really fast. So if you need it to be responsive and quick to capture those really sort of fleeting moments when you're shooting events, then this is a really great lens. It's quite sharp at f4 and gets better as you go on up until about maybe I'd say f13. So in between f4 and f13 is really where this lens performs best. Obviously you're not going to be using it for the f2.8 aperture the entire time, obviously when you shoot landscapes and apertures, but if you stop this lens down then it does get really sharp, and that's where it performs best I feel. So I think this lens is best suited for architecture and landscape work. Possibly the biggest upside of this lens when I purchased it is the fact that it only cost me £159 off of eBay including delivery, which for a full frame lens and the focal range it gives me with that f2.8 aperture is something that I really couldn't miss. Now going into the cons of this lens, so let's find out why I might think this lens might not be great for everyone and some of the obvious downsides that this lens might have. Having the price tag of £159. As I mentioned earlier, this lens has an f2.8 aperture throughout the entire focal range, and while this may be good for getting some background bokeh and getting a good exposure in low light situations, I wouldn't recommend shooting at f2.8 the entire time, and that's basically just because of the fact that it's not really that sharp at f2.8. You have to put a little bit of work in post-production and editing to try and get this it to perform well at f2.8. It's not like really bad, but if you're pixel peeping it sort of just looks like not mushy, just not brilliantly sharp like you'd find with say a Canon lens or anything like that. And obviously just because it's such an old lens as well, you can't expect it to perform brilliantly, so that's one of the downsides of this lens. Like I said, it's not really bad, so and you can save it with sharpening the image a little bit in post-production and doing a little bit of work with it, but if you're looking for really sharp images straight out of this lens, that's something that you're not going to get, so just beware. Something else that annoys me slightly with this lens is the fact that if you're shooting into direct sunlight, it deals very badly with flaring and haze, and it loses a lot of contrast. Even with the lens hood on, it doesn't really help that much, and especially if you zoom it into 40mm, so if you punch in all the way, for some reason it loses so much contrast and gets a bit hazy. I'll just show you here. So if I punch in, you can see it gets noticeably hazy. For some reason it loses a lot of contrast, so that might just be because of the fact that I have my ring light coming directly across me here, and it might just be picking up the ambient light, but that I've noticed that especially when shooting events, if you're shooting in at 40mm, just be prepared for the fact that you're probably going to have to do some post-production work on it using this lens if you want to get a nice contrasty punchy image, and yeah, just a bit of a pain in the backside really, but you can work around it like I said. But obviously just be aware with the £159 price tag, and I'm assuming that any of the other lenses out there will probably be going for the same price, roughly, because it's so old, that if you are going to be shooting anywhere probably around 35 to 40 millimeters, you are going to lose a lot of contrast and it's going to get really hazy. Something that I've already mentioned about this lens in this video is the fact that it's one of Sigma's older lenses, so they don't have the HSN motor in it. So which means that although the autofocus is quite fast and quite snappy and responsive, it's quite loud. So if you're shooting events where you want to try and stay quite discreet and don't want to be noticed, this lens might not be the best option for you. I'd recommend probably looking at something like the 16 to 35 or even the Canon 17 to 40, which is another budget option for wide angle full frame lenses. But it isn't the quietest lens, which is a little bit annoying, but I don't think it's really distracting, so you can get away with it. Also for video work, I'd recommend using manual focus for this lens. I'll talk a little bit about the manual focusing on this lens in a minute, but if you're trying to autofocus with this lens for video where the autofocus is changing a lot, you might not want to do that, because if you're using onboard mics, then you're going to hear it a lot, and you don't want that awful sound going back and forth in your videos, and it's going to be really distracting, so that's also something to bear in mind. Something else I think is worth noting with this lens is the fact that it doesn't use a conventional autofocus / manual focus switch. Basically what you have to do is you have to flick the switch and then pull the focus ring up and down to switch it between manual focus and autofocus, and whilst it's in autofocus, the ring you can turn it as much as you want, which is quite good because it means you can't accidentally damage the motor. So if you switch it to a manual focus and then you have to pull the ring down, that's when you get control over the focus. So just to explain, if it makes sense, you can't have it set to manual focus but have the ring set to autofocus. So you have to make sure that both the focus ring and the switch are set to what you want to do, otherwise it won't do it. You can't have one or the other. So this means, so it's a little bit more complicated, and I had a little bit of trouble trying to work out how it worked initially, but I think it's actually quite intuitive. And for hybrid video photo shooters like myself, I think that's a really good option to have. So it means I can quickly switch between photo and video without too much trouble. So the question that you've probably all been waiting to hear is, would I recommend this lens? And the answer is yes. If you're like myself and if you're on a budget looking for a wide angle lens for a full frame camera, then this is definitely the best way to go. In my opinion, it's at least half the price of the Canon 17 to 40 f4L lens, and the value that you get for the money, I'd say after f4 and upwards, is really great. Like I said, f2.8 all the way through, which is great for getting good exposure and some good bokeh. You are going to have to do some work to try and fix it in post, but I think that's worth it considering the price. Sub £200 for a full frame lens, f2.8 all the way through, and as versatile a focal range as 20 to 40 millimeters. I think it's an absolute steal if you're willing to work around some of its cons. I think if you're willing to work around some of its issues, then you can really produce some great imagery with this lens. And it's also a great lens for crop sensor as well. Like I said earlier, it delivers a focal range of about 32 to 64 millimeters, so it's a great general purpose lens for crop sensor as well. I've actually shot this entire video using the Sigma 20 to 40 millimeter at 2.8, so you can get an idea of how it looks for video. It looks slightly better for video at 2.8, but like I said, I wouldn't really recommend it that much for stills if you're looking to get sharp images straight out of camera. However, I do recommend shooting it at f2.8 if you are willing to make a little bit of an extra effort to make it look nice and crispy. But like I said, images straight out of camera, pretty much a no-go if you're looking to use this for professional work. My version also came with a nice little soft carry pouch which I can put other lenses in, and obviously the 20 to 40 millimeter fits perfectly in here as well, which is quite nice. You also get the lens hood with it, yeah, so it's been a really great addition to my camera bag, and I've taken it on pretty much every shoot I've done since. I actually used this lens to shoot an event on Friday, and both myself and the clients were very happy with the results that I managed to get with this lens. I also used the Canon 85mm f1.8 for that shoot, so I'll put up a couple of pictures on the screen now so you can have a look. So if you have enjoyed watching this video, please do leave a like, comment and subscribe. It really does help us on trying to grow. And if you feel like I've missed anything out, then please do let me know down in the comments, and also follow my Instagram accounts. I've been really active on there recently, and I'm really enjoying sharing what I've been shooting on there, and I just started a behind the scenes account as well. So if you want to know more about what I do and exactly my processes that go into shooting and making YouTube videos, then you can follow them both under here. You should see them hovering just below my fingers right now. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and until the next time, I've been Harry.